All right, guys, like and subscribe. I've got two topics that I want to touch on today. Number one, Sean Strickland getting into a fight with a Navy SEAL at a sparring session. A lot of backlash as a result of it. We're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk about John Jones versus Alex Pereira. Now, let's start with that. First and foremost, a lot of people are expecting that John Jones is going to fight Stipe Miocic in November. Now, hypothetically speaking, let's say Stipe pulls out for whatever reason, and there's multitudes of reasons why somebody like Stipe would pull out. For one, he's old, he's battered, injured, and on top of that, has had accumulated amounts of injuries, which I think will eventually lead to his retirement, but not only that, detrimental to trying to get to the next fight. So who do they call in the process? Who else? A champion who remains active, takes the call on short notice, takes championship fights on short notices. Who other than Alex Pereira taking on John Jones? What would that fight look like? I'm going to talk to you about that in a second. But for now, I want to talk about Sean Strickland's fight with this Navy SEAL that's been circulating around the internet right now. A lot of people are saying that Sean Strickland is a douchebag for doing this. In my humble, honest opinion, I don't think he is. You're talking about a guy who's a Navy SEAL, yes, not a fighter, but come to find out later on, he's a fighter. Not only that, he's a fighter who fought one of my friends, Idris Wasi. He came onto my page on Facebook and said that when I made a post about it, which propelled me to make this video. So he's an MMA fighter. On top of that, he's a jiu-jitsu black belt. And we can count or not count the Navy SEAL aspect of it. I can tell you from a Marine Corps perspective that martial arts in the military in the United States is not that strong. Most guys that are martial arts savvy, that are also military vets, that are also special operators, Marine Recon, Navy SEAL, Army Ranger, things of that nature. A lot of these guys, they train in civilian facilities, in civilian gyms, in order to get better. You see, this is not Russia, nor is it Brazil, where they do have MMA, jiu-jitsu programs within their military and law enforcement. The same thing with even the Middle East, right? With the Emiratis. Obviously, the Emiratis are very big on jiu-jitsu. And you would imagine that their armed forces reaps the benefits of that because they have the Gracies and other Brazilian black belts fly over there to teach their population. But not only their population, but also their military. But not in the U.S. military. And that's going to come to a surprise to a lot of people. They are not martial arts savvy in the military, nor are they in law enforcement. In fact, it's even worse in law enforcement. See, I know dudes that are cops, active cops in his current moment of time, right? And I always talk to them about jiu-jitsu. A lot of these guys I've also trained with, right? So what I can tell you is that many of them don't get to train jiu-jitsu in the proper way that, let's say, pro fighters do. Should they? I think they should. There's an argument that says that in order to be a cop, you have to be a purple belt. I think this is an argument that Joe Rogan makes. Well, the problem is many of these people in the upper echelons of law enforcement, the ones that are sort of dictating the culture, dictating the administrations of these particular law enforcement and military, a lot of these guys are dinosaurs. So the idea of you going to a jiu-jitsu school or even training as a curriculum for your career seems really out of the realm and out of the loop in their view of the world. And reason being is because they look at jiu-jitsu as kids play, something that they drop their kids off for a couple of hours just to get them off their back. But it's not. It's a lot more than that. It is an art that is helpful to your defense in an unarmed situation. Now, the other arguments that I've gotten about that whole situation with the Navy SEAL versus Sean Strickland is that a lot of people say, well, you know what? Many people who train martial arts or fight or have a fighting background usually have this certain chip on their shoulder where they look at everybody as if they are victims in terms of being able to know that you can handle yourself against that guy, but also not knowing that that other guy may have a gun, may have a knife, or can present different types of dangers against you. Now, look, as somebody like myself who is a trained martial artist, who lives that life of training and bettering myself through martial arts, I can tell you that I'm not that naive to think that just because I know how to do a few moves that other people don't know, that somehow I'm going to remain safe, let's say without other objects such as a gun, a knife, or any type of defensive mechanisms that could help me in a tactical advantage. I'm not in any way disillusioned to the idea that I can take on everybody, and especially not in a circumstance where there are weapons involved. I'm very cognizant in those particular scenarios and understand what comes with the consequences of being in that type of environment. However, there are other fighters, other martial artists that really don't understand that. They believe in the naive outlook of the world that everybody's going to give me a fair fight. And that's not the case. Yesterday I was watching No Jumper with Adam 22 and Brick Baby, right? So they had this one Crip that they brought in to interview, right? So basically it's a character unlocked type of scenario that Adam had going on, basically bringing in one more guy to introduce to the world as a new No Jumper character. So what I took out of this young man was that he was very proficient with his hands. I think that he trained boxing. He also has ambitions to not only go into rap, but also go into boxing, and pleaded for real boxing trainers out there in the LA area to come and train him and get him fights so that he can make some money in that particular world of fighting, right? Well, Brick Baby said to him, as he was explaining to Adam 22, Brick Baby, and Lush, that, hey, I love the fight. I'll fight anybody. I'll run the fade with anybody at any time. And Brick Baby reminded him and said, hey, fam, you know that, ain't nobody gonna be always wanting to fight you, fam. You know that. You know that ain't nobody always gonna want to fight you. And what Brick Baby is trying to convey in that message is saying that you may be great with your hands, but other people are not going to fight you there. Okay? And I think anybody who is in a street environment or is in any type of dangerous environment to any degree, or any type of situation where you have to be on your P's and Q's with your security, I think you have to understand that. But I also understand that at some point you realize martial arts and combat sports training is nothing more than just fitness and sport related training. Sport specific and for your fitness. Really, because that's what it comes down to. I don't know if this is going to take up a lot of time, me reading some of the comments that I had on this post regarding Sean Strickland, but I'm going to read to you some of the comments because I think it's quite interesting, some of the comments that we have right here, right? So this is what I wrote in regards to the Sean Strickland and the Navy SEAL situation, right? So I said, I'm not a supporter of Sean Strickland, unless, of course, it's UFC promotion related, but I'm glad he beat that Navy SEALs behind. A lot of you in the military who don't even train with professional civilian fighters think you're so hard. Okay, just like this 50-year-old guy who does this podcast called Don't Unfriendly. Ironically, he goes and unfriends me, right? Talking about he could take me in a fade, right? Yet he spent most of his 40s out of the military, fat as a slob. Gets all triggered and emotional when we start talking about the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, like as if he's shocked that anybody out there has any opinion towards the Palestinians or has some sort of sympathy for them in any kind of way. And I didn't even espouse anything extreme or anything to that extent, right? But understand this, right? Guys like that, they just think that they still have a stake in the game, especially a lot of former military guys. They still think they have a stake in the game and they want to relive that, and they're bored out of their minds of their civilian lives. But put it like this, anybody can get lucky in a gunfight, okay? But strap up those gloves, put on your mouthpiece, get an entrance song going for that one-on-one fade, and most of you are really nothing without your units, your gang, or your platoon, or whatever type of classification you want to put in a group. So let me read to you the 20-some-odd comments that I had on this particular post. So Tony Crane says, not watched it yet, but Sean is D-I-C-K. He cried about some wrestler trying to break his arm sparring, but then goes in heavy on people who can't fight. Well, to sort of rebuttal that, to update what's going on, Tony Crane, by the way, shout out to Tony Crane, one of my Facebook friends, straight out of England. This is a guy that can fight. He's a Navy SEAL who's a black belt jiu-jitsu and is an MMA fighter. And like what I said in the beginning of this video, he fought one of my friends, Idris Wasi. Shout out to Idris Wasi. I see him all the time out here in Sacramento. So, BKFC fighter, MMA vet, has some boxing fights as well. But so I wrote to Tony. I said, I know that incident you're talking about, that dude died of a heart attack. So that jiu-jitsu guy, I believe he was a Hispanic gentleman who Sean Strickland was sparring with or grappling with. Wasn't even sparring, but it was grappling. But yeah, you guys know what I'm talking about. If you know, you know. If you don't, look it up. But yeah, he died of a heart attack. And yeah, Tony says here he didn't know that. So Tony Crane also says, saying that, I don't know the backstory of the military guy, could have asked for it and being CUNT himself. And then I laughed at his comment. So Drew Montgomery, a local fighter out here, right? By the way, a guy that I sort of gotten into it with online, but nowadays we're a little bit cool because, hey, we both represent Sacramento. Why not, right? You know what I'm saying? So, but whatever, shout out to Drew Montgomery. He says in a comment, says, thank you. I appreciate the courage of our servicemen and women, but 8 to 12 weeks of boot camp doesn't make you a fighter or a badass for life. Good one, Drew Montgomery. That's very true. Look, here's something that I noticed with a lot of dudes that come straight out of the military, right? So as you guys know, I've been to the Marine Corps. I've been to the Marine Corps boot camp and things of that nature. So before that, before I went to boot camp, there was one guy that was one grade ahead of me in Old Bridge, New Jersey, right? And when he came home, I don't know what it was. He just had this attitude that he thinks he could beat everybody up because he came from, a 12-week boot camp in the Marine Corps, which is obviously the standard minimum is 12 weeks, right? And I think it still is. But anyways, yeah, this is just an attitude that I noticed with a lot of military guys, right? That especially in the lower ranks, guys that are E1s and E2s and things of that nature. It's just what it is. And even the guys that are a little bit older or guys that are already seasoned into their military careers, there's people that are going to be like that. And the reason why they think that, look, here's the thing. Most people don't know how to fight. So you going through a 12-week course in the military, well, you're already way above ahead of, let's say, the average Joe that just does nothing but live his life as a couch potato all day. Of course, you're going to beat guys like that, but you're not going to beat guys that are seasoned athletes, seasoned MMA fighters, guys that are lifelong martial artists that train every day, that get better every day. It's just the reality of it. So I said to Drew, well said. Look, their purpose and preparation for what they do is very different than an athletic competition that requires you and another person to step in there. The most backing you get inside a cage, a ring, or a mat is your corner giving you advice or intel. And Drew Montgomery says, most fighters are so filled with adrenaline their first few fights, they don't hear anything, even though their coaches are screaming off the top of their lungs. And this is true. Now, I will say I've had a few amateur kickboxing fights where I've actually heard my corner loud and clear as they were giving me instructions on which corner to turn, which direction to pivot, and which angle to take, and whether I should switch stances or not. I've had fights where I could hear, and by the way, this was very early on in my amateur career, not in a season number or in a certain amount of events, but very early on, right? But again, not everyone is different. Everyone is different in how they're going to go about it. But moving on, Drew says, on that note, I wouldn't even attempt a shooting competition against a Marine, an Army Ranger, or on the other hand, many servicemen get humbled over the years when they walk into an MMA gym for the overconfident and bring it hot to guys who are far more seasoned than they are. It only takes one wild punch to make a legitimate sparring partner hit a switch. Then you realize you effed up and it's too late. And I'm glad that he brought that up, because I brought up Cody Garbrandt getting accidentally kicked by Jean-Claude Van Damme when he came out here in Sacramento to train with the Alpha Males. Cody looked like he was about to go Tom Poe on Jean-Claude Van Damme after that kick. He was like, oh, mother effer. And the rest was history from there. Drew says, yup, I remember that. And JCVD is a martial artist at least. So my high school buddy, I don't know if he wants me to mention his real name, but okay, let's just keep his real name out of it. But he's a high school buddy of mine, and he always brings some interesting comments to my page, and he's a very thoughtful individual, very conscientious of the world. So I enjoy his takes, and like my friend Tony, the OG Crip, straight out of Solano and whatnot. I've encouraged him to also get into podcasting, but this is a reason why. I'm going to show you what my friend here, Nitro Peak, the high school friend of mine, says, right? So, a trained fighter gets bested by random bums too. That's very true. You could be Jason Bourne and still get got. Nice little Jason Bourne reference there. Training for combat is supposed to give you an advantage, but whatever gives you the advantage ultimately is a smart thing to do in the modern world, regardless if it's one-on-one or if it's you against the world. Hand-to-hand combat is basically one of the worst ways to survive. Literally, a small woman could take out a trained large male with a kitchen knife entirely on accident if she were to attack him. So why waste your time over training the most costly and risky aspect when no one in any type of real life scenario is going to try and fight fair? For honor, for bragging rights, especially if you're not using it, especially if you're not actively saving the world, you might as well brag about being the world record speed reader. It's essentially useless information to pretty much everyone other than those who might actually want to hurt you, and now they know the primary route to avoid if they were to truly want to succeed. Shit poisoning, so much more cost effective in time and energy, safer to get away in attacking and with anonymity. Basically, yeah, being anonymous. Any idiot can do it in a multitude of ways, and I can't stress enough, is arguably thousands of times more effective alone. You could take out multiple people with hardly any effort. God bless and more power for you for being a good fighter, but I mean, like, you could be the best in the world and a little pneumonia and a little bleach, and you can kiss your ass goodbye if a psychotic 70-year-old house cleaner got beef with you. Unlike the damage that results from intended combat, she could write the whole thing off as a freak accident. He's right about this. He's right about a lot of this. And to end it, he says, this isn't a shot at you. I'm just saying, the same way you're saying they need guns and whatever else, you essentially are relying on the octagon and a set of rules. This is brilliant. And I agree with him on a lot of this. This is what I wrote. Well, I agree with you for the most part. In fact, I agree with all of that, to be quite honest with you. But this Navy SEAL did agree to a one-on-one fade, so this becomes the limit confines that they get to be in. To give even more credit to what Nitro Peak had said, you can actually see the videos of a Sean Strickland challenging LA gang members in traffic only to back down when they flash guns at him, then plea with them for a fair fight. There's videos of Sean Strickland actually doing that. So I go on to say, I'm in no illusion that non-pros and people who've never trained would give me a fair one. That's very true, especially out here in California, right? Now, we love to run the fade in California, right? I've mentioned to a lot of my English homies that the one thing California and London, British culture, or all of England and the UK and their whole Commonwealth have in common is that we love to scrap. Okay, we come from a scrapping culture. But we also have a knife and gun violence problem in England and in California. So that is something to think about. So, yeah, I'm in no illusion that the non-pros would definitely not give me a fair one. So I act accordingly to that. So if you put it like that, martial arts training really is just for sport and fitness. And I've said this early on in the stream. Like most Americans with a little bit of money, Sean has a healthy amount of gun collections and does practice going into ranges. And by the way, just like what Drew Montgomery, my buddy, just said on this post, he said that he would never go one-on-one with a Marine or Army Ranger or any of these service guys at a shooting competition because he knows he would lose, right? And that's just being humble and truthful and being in reality to what other people are capable of as opposed to what you're capable of and whatnot, right? So, however, yeah, I'm in no illusion to believe that Sean could outshoot the SEALs, let alone the Taliban or local gangs, okay? Because that's what they do. That's what these guys do. They come from a gun-toting culture, and that's just what it is. Sean knows what theater to not step in and has proven to back down when the straps come out, and that's the truth. What are you going to do? You're going to go out and fight a bunch of LA gang members when they know that you're a legitimate UFC fighter, a former world champion. Some can argue he's still the world champion because of a controversial decision against Drickus. That's neither here or there. But shout outs to this SEAL named Mitch Agar, okay, the one that fought Sean Strickland, okay? He gave what most of us trained guys wanted, and I think Mitch only did that because Mitch has MMA fights under his belt. So in other words, this right here is a fair fight. You can argue that it's not fair because he's not in the top 15 or top 20 of the UFC. It's fair nonetheless. Moving on, I said Goggins would definitely not step in there with a mouthpiece and gloves and all because, by the way, David Goggins is sort of the beginning of this whole entire thing with him and Sean Strickland going back and forth, and it just happened to be Mitch Agar that had decided to go and step in there. And if he was to step in there, I said that it would look even worse considering how MMA trained Mitch was. And he's a black belt in jiu-jitsu. And by the way, shout outs to this sparring session. This was a full-blown MMA sparring session. Sometimes you'll see Sean Strickland get in there with Sneeko, and they were doing nothing but a boxing sparring session because there were no kicks involved. Mitch actually tried to shoot in for a takedown on Sean Strickland. And obviously, Sean Strickland, being that he has great takedown defense, he's stuffed it. So I also do think that Goggins would outrun Sean. Now, I've never seen Sean do any weights, circuit training, or even go for runs and swims. Sean just goes and spars all day. And in these sparring sessions, he barely does any grappling work. But hey, it works for him. Why not? You know, so Nitro Peak, so his name's Will. I'm sure he doesn't mind that, yeah, his name is Will. I don't know about his attributes or either particular party on this match. I'm just saying most people outside of the sport are unwilling to exchange blows for ego and will look for extreme advantages if they feel they are sincerely threatened. Even more if given an advance notice. And yeah, Will is absolutely right about that. And then Idris Wasi, I mentioned to you, that guy beat my behind. And then I asked him who, Mitch or Sean. And then this is when I found out that Mitch, the Navy SEAL, I actually have his logo tatted on me. What is that? He had his logo well, I'm going to try to get Idris in here to do an interview and see what is what with that. And then I asked him, is it bet related? And then Tabriz Ansari, one of the Team Alpha Male managers, he said to me, yeah, this SEAL is a black belt and an MMA fighter. He actually trains. And so I said, yeah, I've seen that. Yes. So not only is he trained, he also competes, has some fights under his belt. And yes, so that right there is the entire post that I have for Sean Strickland and him getting into that fight with the Navy SEAL. So again, this is what I got to do more often, right? Just talk about the posts that I have, because I have very engaging posts going on my Facebook. So why not just read it and make it into a content? But moving on to, let's say, the last 3 minutes of this content, I'm going to talk about Jon Jones and Alex Pereira in the last 3 minutes of this particular video, and here it goes. So Alex Pereira versus Jon Jones, I'm going to say it out flat. Jon Jones can easily beat Alex Pereira. Why, do you ask? Well, I don't think Alex Pereira has really been tested in his wrestling department in any way, shape, or form. He has been taken down. He's been taken down by lesser guys. He's been taken down by Izzy. Now, what do you think will happen with somebody like Jones, who, by the way, could have been an Olympic level wrestler, but due to the fact that he had to take care of his family early on, he had to jump into a pro career rather than pursue an Olympic career as a wrestler. And we've seen it when he wrestled DC. He took DC down and made it look like he was the Olympic wrestler in comparison to DC. In the striking department, this is where it gets really interesting. This is the only chance that Alex Pereira has against Jon Jones. And I think that's where it becomes really competitive, is in the striking department. But when Jones will have enough of taking shots to the face, getting jabbed up, getting calf kicked, eventually he's going to wait for Alex Pereira to throw that calf kick one more time, catch it, and go for an ankle pick, take him to the ground, get on side control, maybe even half guard positions, and rain elbows from the top. That's how I see the Jon Jones-Alex Pereira fight. Now, the next subject of this matter, will this fight happen? Well, it seems to be the new demand. And unfortunately, it just puts Tom Aspinall out of the picture in the most unfortunate ways. Because now we're demanding for Alex Pereira to fight Jon Jones due to the performance that Alex Pereira has had going on, and the fact that we want to see legendary stuff such as Jon Jones defeated by a guy who won a world title 3 times in 3 different weight classes, which is what we are expecting Alex Pereira to do in this situation against Jon Jones. Now, the obstacles. Stipe Miocic is supposedly supposed to fight Jon Jones in November for a New York card. Now, a traditional New York card that has been going on yearly now, ever since they opened New York back in the Conor McGregor Eddie Alvarez days, one of the first events that they had held when MMA became legal in that state. But will it happen? Well, as I've mentioned early in the stream, and if you're just joining us at this point, go rewind back and take a look at the scenario that I talked about if Jon Jones or Stipe Miocic was to pull out. More than likely Stipe Miocic, because of the career damage, and not only that, just the injuries that have been plaguing him in the recent times. So that is a possibility. That is the only possibility that this fight happens. And then on top of that, right now, as we made this video, it is July 3rd, Wednesday, 9 a.m. in the morning, West Coast time. In a couple of weeks, you're going to have UFC Manchester, UFC 304, headlined by Bilal Muhammad and Leon Edwards, defending as the champion, and the interim championship for the heavyweight division, Curtis Blaydes and Tom Aspinall. That's what's going on in the heavyweight division right now. If Tom Aspinall wins, which he is projected to win, but again, you never know. Curtis Blaydes is a dog, and he has shown that he can beat Tom Aspinall with just the early snippets of what they had going on in their first fight, obviously with a freak accident that blew the leg off of Tom Aspinall. You never know what's going to happen with that fight, and if Curtis Blaydes wins, then obviously it just changes the whole trajectory of the heavyweight division, but at the same time, just really takes away an opportunity from Tom Aspinall when, in reality, he really should be fighting Jon Jones next, not Stipe Miocic, nor even Alex Pereira. But now Alex Pereira has become a fighter that is on demand, and people want to see greatness out of him. And what greatness is that exactly? They want to see him go into the heavyweight division and win a third belt, something that has never been done before. And then on top of that, he's only had 12 fights in his career. Already had 12 fights, had 2 losses. Well, one of the losses he's had against Izzy, a very major one, but obviously after he had that knockout loss, he came back, became the light heavyweight champion of the world. But it's interesting to see where all of this goes, because there's a lot of these new matchups that we never would have imagined before, right? We never would have imagined Tom Aspinall and Jon Jones. But now that fight doesn't really seem like it's going to happen anytime soon, because they're both busy with their own work that they have to do. Well, now Alex Pereira just got done with the title fight, and now he's looking for the next work that he needs, and the closest thing that he has is to once again go on short notice and hope that Stipe Miocic falls out for that November card. Because otherwise, it's going to be a very long time before we see that fight against Jon Jones, which, by the way, could really solidify Alex Pereira's name in the history of the UFC's Hall of Fame class of legendary fighters that have gone on to do legendary things. So that is all that I have for this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I will see you guys in the next content, inshallah.